I want to introduce a couple of our colleagues here, so I'm going to introduce them one by one and have them join me on the stage. So I'm going to ask Erica Bernal, the CEO of NALEO, to join me on stage first. Jonathan Diaz from the Campaign Legal Center. Virginia K. Solomon from Common Cause. And Héctor Sánchez Barba from Mi Familia Vota. And we're going to take a seat. All right. These waters for us. So I will tell you that for me, this is really an honor and a privilege. I am humbled to actually be on this stage with these absolutely incredible leaders. LULAC is a legacy organization. We are 97 years old. We're very old. We've been around a long time. But the fact of the matter is that we can't do the work that we do on our own. And we rely on our partners to be able to reach and have impact from a policy, legislative, and advocacy perspective when it comes to issues that are impacting the Latino community. We are also decentralized, right? We have councils around the country and individual members, and our expertise really is kind of sort of boots on the ground in these communities. We don't have the legal capacity that the Campaign Legal Center does. And we rely on them for their litigation work and expertise. And I've been happy to join in several lawsuits already this year protecting Latino civil rights. We don't have the capacity that Héctor Sánchez Barba has been able to build on the ground in getting our Latino community to get out and register to vote and vote. And he has been one of our most ardent and most successful leaders and advocates for our community. And NALEO, you know, as an advocacy organization, we kind of have two routes to impact our community. We can do the litigation work, which can take a long time. We can do policy work, which can sometimes take years, and depending on who's in administration, you may not get any return on. And one of the things that I've been pushing our organization is that the most direct way to impact the Latino community from a policy and government perspective is to get more Latinos elected. That is the most direct way to power. And Erica, through NALEO, works with all of our Latino elected officials, Democrats and Republicans around the country. And then Virginia K. Solomon, who I have to admit, I've just gotten to know over the last 2 years. And she was like, I'm Latina. And she's been one of my dear friends and partners and advocates. And so I'm so happy that you're here to join us from Common Cause. So what I want to do is just kind of sort of start off and let's do a quick poll, right? What do you think are the biggest issues impacting the Latino community? Because each of you have a different perspective. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and perspective. And we'll go down the line.
Sure. Well, first, Juan, thank you to you and LULAC for the invitation. I'm also honored to be on this panel with my colleagues, and it's great to be with all of you. Welcome to Southern California. You are in Los Angeles County, my home, so it's great to have you with us here, having these important conversations. We just had the NALEO conference 2 weeks ago in Atlanta, right? We were joking earlier that everyone is on the rounds of the Latino conference circuit, and so I think we're all spending some meaningful time thinking very deeply about this moment and what it means for our community. And I will share with you that coming about our conference, we really talked about the important role that all these different strategies play together, whether it's the legal strategies, the tactics around mobilizing our community, working with our Latino leadership. And one of the things that we've been focused on at NALEO is understanding that our community sent a very direct message in the last election that they are feeling the strain of life, that the American dream that they were promised is failing them, whether it's our seniors struggling in their golden years, whether it's our young people struggling to find the job after they did everything that they were told they needed to do, and that what our community is eager for are solutions to the problems that we've been talking about for decades now, certainly in the 25 years that I've been doing this work, including the issue of immigration. And so at NALEO, we're working extremely hard to make sure, Juan, that it's not just about Latino representation. That is absolutely a critical strategy, but it's that those elected officials, as they're getting elected, are being effective in moving the needle and achieving policy wins in manners that really impact and change the lives of our community, whether it's access to better, affordable, safe housing, which is a complex issue we've been dealing with now across the country for many years and are still working very hard to solve, whether it's access to economic mobility and opportunity, whether it's our schools and the resources that they continue to need to provide the right education and opportunity for our students. These are challenges that persist. They're the challenges that our community continues to face every single day. And I would argue that if anything we saw in the last cycle is that our community's frustrated and they're fed up with lack of getting things done and getting things resolved. And it's a challenge that we have issued to our membership of Latino elected officials across the country, particularly those working at the state and local level, that they have this chance to step up, rise above the noise and the political fare happening at the national level, and drill down to getting results for our community in meaningful ways that matter to them. It's not just about getting elected, it's working hard, and guess what? Sometimes that means, Juan, working with people you don't agree with on everything. But if you can find common ground on that one thing that makes lives better for the people that voted you into office, that you represent in your city, in your school district, in your community, then we need to achieve results.
Thank you, Erica. You know, one of the things that I tell a lot of folks is that we have to be comfortable in uncomfortable spaces. There's a lot of meetings that I go to where I'm the only Latino in the room. And that's tough. I'm 52, been and seen a lot of different things. But it's important that we show up, that we represent our community, and that we do so in a fully open and intersectional way. Some of our best work over the last couple of years, has been in partnership with the NAACP, the Leadership Conference, the Urban League. We have to be able to work across communities, racial, ethnic communities as well, and we also need to continue to do so in a bipartisan way. So Erica, thank you for your leadership. Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you, Juan, and thank you, LULAC, for having me, for having us here. So as a civil rights attorney, you know, the things that really keep me up at night these days are the magnitude of the attacks that we're seeing on our Constitution, on the rule of law, and on our elections. And the ways that those attacks are really targeting the Latino community in particular. So like Juan said, it's been our privilege at Campaign Legal Center to represent LULAC in a number of lawsuits over the years, especially this year, challenging not only actions by the federal government, but also by state and local governments that limit the ability of Latino communities and other communities of color to access the ballot. There's a Supreme Court case from the 1880s that I think we've cited in every voting rights lawsuit I've ever filed. It's called Yickwo versus Hopkins. It's out of California. And there's a line in that decision that says that the right to vote is fundamental to our constitutional structure because it is preservative of all other rights. It is the foundation through which we as the people get to exercise power and determine what our government looks like and what its priorities are. So any other issue that you care about, whether it's the environment, whether it's healthcare, whether it's the economy, immigration, whatever it is, the right to vote and equal access to the ballot is essential to getting anything done on those issues. But now what we're seeing, and then the topic of this panel is civic engagement, and we're seeing that the right to vote, the ability to not just get to the ballot box and cast a ballot, but to have that ballot mean something is under threat. not just from gerrymandered districts, not just from voter purges that are removing people from the rolls even when they're eligible and sometimes have been voting for decades, but even down to what it means to be a US citizen, what it means to be a part of the political community of this country. And we've never had, at least in the modern era, a federal administration that has been so hostile to the idea of a multiracial democracy that includes Latinos. And so when we look at efforts by the president to take control over election administration in ways that the Constitution does not allow, when we look at efforts to redefine birthright citizenship, to attack DEI in schools, it's all connected. It's all part of an effort to redefine who gets to be part of American civic life, who gets to make the decisions, who gets to be a part of this community. And so I look at my work and the work that my fellow panelists do up here, the work that LULAC does, as essential to making sure that we have a seat at that table. As Latinos, that we get to be a part of this country that we helped build. And for me, that starts with preserving access to the ballot box and making sure that everybody's vote means something.
And it goes beyond the ballot box, because what we see in the news on immigration and the raids in Los Angeles, America, your home, your backyard, they're doing the same thing in the courts, literally trying to take our power through litigation, through 100 executive orders signed in the first couple of days. We filed our first lawsuit against the president on January 20th, 5 or 6 hours after he got into office. With Jonathan's help, we were able to file another lawsuit on voting rights issues. And guess what? We're winning. We're actually winning, you know? And so I wanted to include the litigation piece, because it may not be as sexy as kind of sort of going out there and protesting and carrying signs, but we need good lawyers, smart lawyers, good-looking lawyers like this guy over here, right? To be able to go in and protect our rights. Because, I mean, look, I go around, some folks don't know who LULAC is. They don't know what we do, but I can tell you this. Everyone in this room, in one way or another, has benefited from the litigation work that LULAC has done, going back to Menendez versus Westminster, when the schools in California were segregated for Mexican children, or Texas v. Hernandez, where Latinos in 1954 didn't have the right to serve on juries. Not that long ago. Your grandparents were adults at that time. And litigation is one of the things that we're investing significantly in and expanding our portfolio, and will continue to do so moving forward. Thank you, Jonathan. Virginia.
So good to see everybody. I think we got you after lunch because everybody looks like they're a little bit tired. So I'm not going to speak super loud, but I'm going to try to make you stay awake. It is first, thank you, Juan, an honor. Juan came to the civil rights community in his role about 2 years ago, and he's been a joy to work with since. For me, when I think about the threats, and it's easy to talk about it through a policy lens, we can say, oh, it's an issue of immigration, or it's an issue of healthcare, or it's an issue of education. I have a little bit of a different take because I know we're going to get into that. I think we have to remind ourselves that being Latino in this country, or Latina in this country, is a 360-degree experience. That we're not all the same. There are white Latinas, black Latinas, mestizo, you name it, different experiences, whether you are Mexicana, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Colombian, we're all very different. And we come out of the same diaspora, but our experiences in this country are not the same. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is that oftentimes we are not unified as a community. And so for me, that means how do we bring ourselves together in real ways to demonstrate our power, because we have more power that is not being fulfilled and recognized in this moment. We have the ability to change everything in this country if we stand together and are unified. And oftentimes we are at odds with one another because of policy issues, because you support abortion or you don't, or you struggle with what it means to be LGBTQ in this community, or maybe you came from a church that didn't believe in that. But our fundamental basic humanity is at stake here in this moment, who we are, if we are to exist in this country. So all of the policy threats, yes, they exist. But we are here. We've always been here. We're not going anywhere. And so the question that I ask for everybody is, what are we going to do to unify across the board so that we can come together and utilize our political power in this upcoming election as they try to redistrict and gerrymander maps? You see what's happening in Texas. They want to take away seats from Black and brown leaders. They will say that it's not racial gerrymandering. It is racial gerrymandering because they are afraid of who you will vote for. And so for me, the biggest challenge that we face right now when it comes to civic engagement is not being unified and speaking with one voice and saying, hell no, you will not do this to us in our community. So that's where I am.
And sadly, the list is long. It's not just redistricting. Now they want to count us out of the census. Policy by tweets. Do they call them tweets on Truth Social? Truths? Untruths. We're going to call them untruths. And we have to be smart. We have to be educated. We have to be informed to counter that narrative and make it clear that we're not going anywhere. And we're going to fight for the rights of our community. Birthright citizenship. We're not going to stand down from that fight. We're not going to stand down the fight on voting rights. And on the redistricting, it cuts across everything. Funding on education, funding on government benefit programs, funding on health and welfare programs, when our community is significantly, the disparities in education, wealth, and health are some of the worst in this country. They keep saying, well, Latino home ownership is continuing to rise. Well, since 1976, it's been 49 to 50%. Now we're at 52%. But you know what? The disparity is actually greater. And so there's still so much more that we need to fight with. Héctor, you're on the ground. What's your perspective?
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's always a joy to come to LULAC. We have gone through so much together in my different roles when I was the president of NHLA, the executive director of LACLA. I want to shout out to my dear sister. I see you, sister, or presidenta in LA from LACLA. And we have done so much, and I want to contextualize it because it's so important for how long we have been fighting together. I just mentioned my personal experiences collaborating with LULAC and how important it is, especially at this time, to have membership organizations. Members in organizations are the warriors on the front lines fighting for our democracy, protecting our democracy, not only for our community, but for everybody at a time when extremism is at the highest level. I remember marching together, shoulder to shoulder, when we were in the Selma to Montgomery march. Many times, 100 degrees, at a time when it was almost 10 years ago when there was a lot of attacks, HB 56 in Alabama, all the attacks on unions, all the attacks on education, all the attacks on immigrants, etc. We came together and we marched all the way from Selma to Montgomery, remembering that people die in this nation for the right to work. Our African-American brothers and sisters, the Latino community have been fighting for so long for the basic right to vote. And this is the moment where we are. And I want to contextualize it from the perspective that some of the best fighters for democracy in the nation are in this room. Those people that have been undocumented and unafraid. I saw Gabby, I think she was sitting outside, and many dreamers that have been in the front lines, putting everything on the line to fight for a cause, for a democracy. And this is the context of where we are the main target of one of the most extremist administrations that we have seen in the history of this nation. And the main target of this administration is undocumented immigrants, but in the context also of the Latino community. We're being targeted, we're being excluded, we're being, it's unacceptable what is happening. There is an army called ICE that is after our community, regardless if you're documented or not. And it's on Gestapo-like tactics that are coming after workers in Home Depot. They're coming after farm workers in the fields that are feeding the nation, are coming after children and mothers, and it's unacceptable, and it's an army that is coming after our community. And we need to turn all this historical organizing into political power. Political power and civic participation is the solution to a lot of the problems that we're seeing today. It doesn't matter anymore if you work in education, policy, health, child poverty, anything, and I work on most of those policy issues. Most of the time, each policy issue is isolated from the other policy issues. Every policy issue in the nation right now and every advocacy work and everything in the nation must be connected to civic participation, because otherwise we're not gonna be able to fight the biggest enemy that we had in the history of the Latino and the immigrant community, which is Donald Trump, and we need to highlight it. It's not politics, it's the reality of a person that is coming after our families, that is coming with an entire administration after our communities. And if we don't organize, and if we don't organize fast on a new level, it's gonna be too late, not only for us, but for the entire democracy. So the main message is organize, mobilize, resist. In Mi Familia, Vota, we do civic participation, we do citizenship. We need to have a massive citizenship campaign before they try to take the possibility of green card holders away. We need to have massive numbers of voter registration. We need to have massive numbers of civic participation, and the biggest mobilization in the history of the nation, getting Latinos out to vote. And we need to fight the element that we are always, not we, the media, the system is blaming everything that happens in democracy on Latinos. In a second, I'm going to discuss this election, but what happened in the last election, every interview that I did after the last presidential election, every single interview from the New York Times to local newspapers, the question was, what happened with Latinos in Miami, and what happened with those 3 Mexicans in the Rio Grande Valley? And I say, no, you're asking the wrong question. The question was in the context of why a percentage of Latinos moved and voted for Trump in the last presidential election. The question that they need to be asking is, in the main paragraph, in the headlines of all the newspapers should have been, minorities save democracy. Because all the minorities in the nation in the last presidential election voted against Donald Trump. The only group in the nation that voted for Donald Trump in a majority, 60% is the white vote. In 16, in 20, and in this election. Nobody knows that. I haven't seen a single article covering that. This is not to divide, but this is to really understand what is happening in the community. And in my second intervention, I'm gonna talk about the structural challenges that exclude Latinos from basic access to democracy.
Thank you, Hector. We live in the world's most powerful country. Forget greatest. We live in the world's most powerful country. And I learned early on from my time at the NAACP something that always stuck with me, which is freedom isn't free. You gotta fight for it. You gotta march for it. You gotta vote. You have to show up and take action. And, you know, this job is hard because we have to separate our professional careers and what we do and our families and children and loved ones that we care for with these stories and threats that we get each and every day from the community. And so I want to thank each of you because I know you carry that with you where you go. But it is my deep fear that, you know, they're trying to create the second-class citizen in this country. If you follow the line, they're saying, if you're born here and you're undocumented, you don't have birthright citizenship. That's one through line, right? They want you to leave, but then they want you to come back with a different kind of visa. A visa where you can come and work, potentially be exploited, and work at significantly lower labor costs, right? They still want you to pay taxes, but they don't want you to have any of the benefits from Social Security at all. In short, saying you can come and you can be temporary until we don't need you anymore, and then we're going to kick you out. And you will never have any of the benefits of citizenship. My parents are immigrants. My mother came from Colombia. My father came from Peru. I'm a first-generation immigrant, and I'm a father to 3. And most folks, especially my family, they didn't know what braceros were. They weren't Mexican-American. But in fact, we're going back to that if they have their way. And the other thing is that the system is broken. Forget Democrats or Republicans, the system is broken for Latinos at the end of the day. And so the question I have is, how do we begin to fix that, right? Because, I can tell you this, we're butting our heads and thinking everything that we can think of to figure it out. I hope we can do it in my lifetime, but as I look out at each of you, I know that you are our future, and we're not going to be able to get there without your engagement. So Erica, let's start with, what advice do we have? What can these leaders, young leaders, do, not tomorrow, not a year from now, leaving this, what can they do to change this system and make an impact?
Yeah, so I appreciate how each of my colleagues have really highlighted the power that exists and that needs to come from our own community. We at NALEO are a nonpartisan organization, which means we have Democrats, Republicans, Independents, everything in between. As you can imagine, in today's environment, it's extremely challenging work to keep folks across political ideologies at the same table around the premise that Latinos in America deserve a place in the political table. And what does give me hope, Juan, right, because obviously there's a tremendous amount of challenges, we've talked about them, we all know what they are, is precisely the folks that are in this room, the folks who were gathered 2 weeks ago at NALEO, who were at Unidos earlier this week, who have a deep commitment to taking the power into our own hands. The political parties, the political structures, they're not going to save us. As a community, we need to do this for ourselves. We need folks like you to run for office. We need folks like you who have elected officials, even if they look like us, but are not delivering, and say, you know what, you didn't get the job done, it's my turn. I'm ready to step up. I'm ready to make a change. I'm ready to speak with courage and do the hard things. I'm ready to work with others to make sure that we can get things done. And we need to ensure that the barriers that we've talked about today continue to get addressed. Héctor brought up an incredibly important point. We at NALEO are working on 2 issues that have been pillars to our political advancement as a community. On citizenship, not just having helped naturalize hundreds of thousands of people since 1982, but really focused on the fight that is at our doorstep that is going to make Latinos and other permanent residents becoming U.S. citizens all the more difficult. It is an effort to regress, to slow down the political progress of our community when it comes to becoming citizens and voters. And so we're very, very focused on doing all we can to mobilize NALEO members, to mobilize our partners, to do all that we can. And we're certainly going to need a legal strategy, because that's really what we're relying on these days for most of these battles, is the courts, to ensure that we hold on to the progress that we made. You mentioned the census, Juan, and that is the other ridiculous tweet we heard yesterday. We're not going to have another census mid-decade. It's unconstitutional. It takes 14 years to plan a census. It costs billions of dollars. And so as a community, we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we understand what's at stake, that we understand the power that we hold, that we rise up to the moment, and that we help those that are fighting continue to be effective. And from NALEO's perspective as a nonpartisan organization, and I want to recognize that all of the groups doing this work have a role to play, is that this transcends political ideology. It's not about one party or the other. It's about Latinos doing this for ourselves. And so it's the moment that we're all going to look back one day and be able to say, I was on the ground, I did my part, I contributed, and I believe that we're gonna see people in this room run for office, lead organizations like NALEO and maybe the others that are represented here today, and are gonna continue to do so with passion, leading with your values, and working hard at the end of the day to improve the lives of our community, which is what drives us.
I see a couple of hands up, okay? And I want to acknowledge them first of all. And I applaud you all for your patience because you've been listening to a lot of talking heads all day long. So I'm going to make some time at the end to actually do Q&A because I do want to hear from each of you, okay? So we're going to do like another 5 minutes on a couple of topics and then we'll take some questions if that's okay with everybody. Good? Okay. So are we being fooled? Right? We always hear about these wedge issues, right? Wedge issues on women's rights or abortion, for example. These wedge issues on immigration and TPS and DACA, for example. I mean, we know that the attacks are real, right? And these are issues that are very specific to our community in some cases, whether you are from Nicaragua, Honduras, or Guatemala, or Venezuela, in some cases. But while they're talking about that, while ICE has a whole media team focused on, showcasing these raids that they're doing, they're gutting the system when we're not paying attention, right? HR 1 for me is a pseudo-immigration bill. $160 billion. We haven't even seen that come into play yet. But at the same time, they gutted all of our welfare benefits program, health benefits program. Are we being fooled? Are we paying attention to the right things? Do we need to expand our playbook?
I do think we need to think about this moment differently than we have, even the first Trump administration or other, historical moments, where the Latino community has been targeted because of the ways in which this administration is moving so rapidly and so recklessly to break things without consequence. And the reason that we are in the situation that we're in now is because of a broken political system. And it's not going to be enough when we get through this second Trump term to pick up those pieces and put it back together the way it was before. The reason that we are where we are now on immigration, on healthcare, on voting rights, is because we are living in a political system that is dominated by dark money, that is characterized by voting districts that allow for representatives who are not responsive to the needs of their communities, because all they need to do is win a primary with the help of a couple of billionaire donors, and they don't actually have to care about what the voters think, about what you all think. And so I think we really need to be creative and radically reimagine what an actually representative and transparent democracy looks like. One that is responsive to the will of the people. In the 2024 election, we worked on a Trust in Elections campaign, a messaging campaign targeting the battleground states, really targeting voters in the political middle to trust in the electoral process. And what we found was there isn't a lot of trust. There's not a lot of trust in our institutions because our institutions are failing. And what we did find was the people who can actually get through are people you know. So like Erica said, it's up to all of you to be those voices in your own communities, to tell people why voting matters, why the things that they care about that are affecting their everyday lives can only be solved through massive civic engagement and participation. And that's something that is hard and is gonna take a lot of effort and a lot of energy. The courts are not gonna save us. We are holding the line as best we can. It's a scary thing to say as a litigator, that lawsuits are not gonna save us. They're gonna keep us from teetering over the edge, but that's not how we're gonna be able to build a democracy that actually works for everybody. That's gonna take in the investment and involvement of everybody in this room and outside of this room and out in your families, your friends, your networks. And so I do think that we need to think about not just how do we stop the bleeding right now, but how do we build something better after this?
The silver lining I've had as of late is January 20th, 2029, we'll have a new president. You know, it's not forever, and the Latino community is strong and resilient, and we will get through this. Virginia, are Latinas. They were like the men wavered. You know, I feel bad being a Latino male from Miami. I didn't vote for you know who. But I accept that blame because there's more that we can do. But from a Latina perspective, Latinas held strong this election cycle, right? Yeah. How and what message can we deliver to our Latina leaders, and what can they do to stand up and speak their power?
I mean, I've never known a Latina who has an issue with speaking her voice, I'll say that much. But Latinas are the backbone of every family, every community. And so for me, I would say to continue being that voice. The other thing, I think, though, going back to what was said earlier about running for office, I want to name, you know, the number of Latinos who are in office is small but growing. And there's such an opportunity. My I live in Maryland in a town called Hyattsville. And so we just had our local city council elections. And some of those people were elected by like 2-3 votes. Like one of my dear friends, I used to work for an organization called Kase Maryland, Kase in Action, for many, many years. And a man who, you know how you have those coworkers that come with you everywhere you go? He's one of my colleagues. We still work together. He was on the city council, and he won by like 15 votes. He was the first Latino to run and actually win. And I think that there are opportunities all over this country when we talk about having a voice and having power and being that moral compass and moral voice. It means going and running for school board. These are some elections that you can win with $500. All you need is the little signs. Do the door knocking in your community. You know, being on your city council, your county council, your school board, whatever local office there is, because that is where power is held first and foremost. And those are the easiest entry points in. The other thing I would say is government. A lot of people think you have to run for office in government. There are government jobs, whether it's in your local elections office, becoming an election administrator. We talk about people wanting to steal elections, they're giving people a hard time. Becoming an election worker, standing up and becoming an elections administrator. There is tons of training. You don't even have to have a college degree to do that. You just have the will to be able to be there and do the work, do the hard work. These are all of the things that I think allow us to have an entry point into having that voice and being able to create that demand from our people about what we want to see happen and being able to have that entry point into leadership and having that entry point into voice. The other thing I would say is there are a lot of amazing organizations. Like if you know people who aren't a member of LULAC, every person in this room should walk away committing to trying to get 10 people to sign up to be a member of LULAC. 10 people. Everybody knows 10 people. Can I get you to commit to join and become a member of LULAC? So everything that we can do to collectively build power, bring more people, more voices in, that makes us louder. The louder we are, the harder we are to ignore. And so that would be what I would say with that.
Thank you, Virginia. Héctor, I was with Héctor a week ago, 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C. And look, I'm a tech guy, right? I've been working in tech for a long time. Understand it, I think, pretty well. And Héctor is way ahead of me thinking about technology and AI. Our community is under-resourced, and we have limited capacity when it comes to the staff and professional staff to be able to do the work. And when it comes to technology, you know, I say it often, there are laws that haven't been written yet that will discriminate against our community, right? Redlining through Zillow, for example. Instant credit isn't really instant because they're going through all your social media feeds and all your bank accounts to see how much money you have and determining, oh, well, she's Latina, we're going to lower her credit score and we're not going to give her as much credit. even though you are more than credit worthy. But how can we use technology and AI to our advantage, and what are you doing with AI?
Yeah, I think that question goes to the heart of a lot of the big challenges that we're facing. Let me start from the challenges and get to the answer. The superficial analysis of the Latino vote in this election is unacceptable. Everybody says Latinos and coming attack Latinos on how the community voted this last election, but very few voices are sophisticated enough to do a very basic analysis of how democracy works and the structural challenges that exclude Latinos from the democratic process. First, there is a correlation between money and results in elections. The Latino community is the most underinvested by far in every political infrastructure. I mean, all the political tables in the nation, from the progressive point of view and also in other spaces, from the politics, from parties, from foundations. The most underinvested group from foundations, HIP has an analysis that says that only 1% of all the philanthropic money comes to the Latino community in general. So you can take that to the civic participation, democracy, and politics. And it's embarrassing. There is no money when it comes to working in democracy and civic participation in the Latino community. When I tell you no money, look at some of the numbers that we have, and I can tell you, I know all the Latino organizations doing this work, if we put our budgets together related to politics and compare that to how much it costs in billions, it's a serious problem. Second, voter suppression. We're the community that is excluded the most from just trampas to make it really hard for the community to participate. We saw the highest number of intimidation. Mi Familia Vota has the largest field infrastructure in the Latino community. We have field infrastructures in 10 states. We saw the biggest harassment of canvassers that we have ever seen. We saw guns at the doors. Some of my canvassers were attacked. A lot of hate happening. We saw La Migra more than we have seen in the past, intimidating our communities in the voting places. We saw the highest number of misinformation and disinformation in Spanish that we have ever seen. And I want to go to the answer from that perspective. So it's really hard for one of the groups that has the highest number of working class families to participate in the democratic process. From that perspective, we created a system. If we have all this information that we constantly have with being at the doors, being in the communities, and all of our research shows that when you do the basic work of democracy, Latinos turn out to vote in record numbers more than any other community, and they vote against extremism. We don't vote in that direction. We don't support a lot of these issues. So, but we need to do the basic work of democracy, of engaging, and I love what you say, Virginia. Organizing is at the center of this. We all need to be organizers. So we start investing heavily, informed by what we see on the ground, by the research of what we see in the communities. And 4 years ago, we built a department of data, artificial intelligence, data, and technology to answer the following questions. How can we use data and technology, the most sophisticated, not in the Latino community, the most sophisticated in the progressive spaces, to fight the big challenges that we're facing? That was the question that we posed. And the answer, 4 years after, and very serious investment in this dream, we're in the process to launching the most sophisticated artificial intelligence 6 tools to fight misinformation and disinformation real time, to have a space and an artificial intelligence application that is going to guide you through the process if you want to become a citizen. It guides you and it gives you a lot of the different elements that we have never. It's not an app. It's a very sophisticated space. We also need people at the end of the process on citizenship, voter registration, voter mobilization. If you put your district, we can guide you in where do you vote, can you do vote by mail, can you vote early, can you become a citizen, what you need to do, etc. We are targeting rural areas, we're targeting misinformation and disinformation, etc. So this is the ad. Please, 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 please promote this because it's something that we never had in the history of our community. This access to this level of technology and artificial intelligence is all over social media. Get familiar with this, promote it, and we're just so happy that we're always excluded from access to to technology in everything. We're the last one to this party for structural problems of exclusion. And right now, we're so happy to collaborate con un granito de arena to make this a better and stronger democracy.
Thank you, Hector. So forward-looking, really, for our community, and I'm very proud that it's a Latino-funded, Latino homegrown system. And so we're looking forward to partner with you on that, Hector, as well. All right, we're going to ask a couple questions now. We're going to take a Q&A. And by the way, the last session is 100% Q&A. It's a community forum. We're going to have Gabby Pacheco, Carlos Eduardo Espina going to come on here in a little while. But I do want to answer some of the questions. So the guy with the cool hair over there, that guy with the glasses, yeah. Is that a mullet? Is that, what is that? Is that a shot? All right. Tell me your name and where you're from.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I am V. Belchan-Leyva. I am from Washington, LULAC Council 47013. I'm the VP of Youth there. My question, every time I'm in spaces like this, I always hear, because we focus on the hope, right? I hear like, we have to be united, we have to be getting everyone rallied together and everything. But what I sometimes get stuck on is the fact that then there's still the infighting with the people that are Latinos who get into positions of like power, and then they don't let go of that power, right? Like people who have been in councils or have been president of their organizations, but then they don't want to move on and let it go for the next generation that needs to be able to take that over. How can we build a system within ourselves or like that model for the next generation? Because I'm kind of tired of you know, some older generations kind of placating to the stuff that's going on. You know, people, like we see that in Congress, they're not using similar or at least tactics to combat what the other side is doing. So that's my question.
Oh, thank you so much. I want to take that one. I mean, I think that cuts across not just LULAC as an organization, but almost any of the organizations that we work with. And so let me tackle it both from a LULAC perspective and in a larger context. Whether they like it or not, LULAC is going to change, period. Whether they like it or not. You know, this whole demographics, this destiny, is also what's going to change this organization. Listen, I took this job because I thought I could do a good job. I knew it would help our community, but I didn't do it to be here for 10 or 15 or 20 years. I see, like, I have to do this work in the next 3 or 4 years to be able to put it in the position that it needs to be for the next 100 years, and that is 100% giving the keys to our young leaders like you. And so, look, Julian's here. We talked a little bit earlier before we came up here. I've gotten a lot of complaints via email about the forums. Our voice isn't being heard, right? Send me those emails. I will respond to them. We would change the format. We will give you the opportunity to have a platform to do so, okay? But real change takes courage, too, and the courage to speak up and show up, and I encourage you to continue to do that, because it does make a difference for us and for our organization.
Well, good afternoon, y'all. Thank you so much for your time and for that wonderful presentation. My name is Juan. I'm a rising junior at Trinity College in Connecticut. And funny enough, I have been registering people to vote since 2022 midterms in Georgia. And I partnered up with NALEO, which is the Georgia version of NALEO. So shout out to NALEO. But I am curious about something. You know, I have been doing this for years, and I often find that my generation is just very disappointed. You know, I have had people from all backgrounds at Trinity in Connecticut, in Georgia, and especially from my generation, young people telling me that they feel that their vote doesn't count and that their electoral power doesn't really exist, you know. So I want to hear from the experts, you know, what can we do to engage my generation more? Because I am clear that our vote does have a power, but what do I have to do to let them know that that is the case, that is the truth, and that they don't feel discouraged?
Look that way. Yeah. Over there, I mean, you got
I will
Erica.
start by telling you that, I'm looking at around the table, I think we'll all tell you we've been doing this a long time. Some of those battles feels not too different from when we started 25 or 30 years ago, but we're making changes and we're moving forward. And I want to go back because I think your question is somewhat related to the previous question in that there's a full turnover that we're starting to see across all sectors in generational leadership. It is happening in philanthropy, and it is kind of really beginning to bring some effect. It's happening in the nonprofit sector. I think in our own organizations, I've been the CEO for 3 months. Previous leader did incredible work. He's a giant of our movement. But like you, Juan, I have a plan. I don't plan to be here very long. I want to set up this organization for the next leader. And more importantly is that as folks like you come into play, into leadership, we need to change the systems that make it easier to bring along new leaders. And I don't want to sit here for 30 years, right, and wait for the next one. So to your point, this is a long-term work. And I'm not sure there's anything around that we can do, but finding those examples of leaders that are making change, finding opportunities, whether someone holds a title or not, influence and power and the ability to mobilize people is not tied to a title. And that change matters, and it helps us move in the right direction incrementally, and the moment will come when it's your turn, and your job is to be ready to step into that moment when it comes.
And I think part of the answer, too, is acknowledging the structures that do make it harder for people to vote, that do make it so that your vote matters less than it would have 20 years ago when we had a fully functioning Voting Rights Act and when we didn't have the gerrymandered districts that we have today, before Citizens United. And so acknowledging those structural barriers that do dilute voting power, especially in Latino communities, and talking about how we're gonna change that. What are the big picture reforms that we're gonna make so that people's votes actually translate into political power? And like Virginia was saying earlier, we can't always just think about the White House. We can't always just think about Congress. There are local races where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes really matter. Judges. There are elected judges in a lot of local jurisdictions. And there was a Virginia legislative race in the last cycle that was decided by 1 vote. And those school boards, those city councils, school boards are the ones making decisions about whether or not to ban books in schools. Those city councils are the ones deciding about whether or not their city's police force is going to enter into an agreement with ICE for immigration enforcement. All of those local races matter so much to people's everyday lives, and that's where especially young people can have the biggest impact, because those are low turnout races. You get all your friends, you get all of your social networks to turn out, you can swing a city council race. You can swing a mayor. You can make tangible, real change in your community. And when politics starts like that locally, that's how you build to national change.
Just a quick comment, because we have a youth leadership program. You make a very good point. But what we have witnessed with all the research that we have is that once you give the right tools to young people and access, it's amazing. And I honestly believe that a lot of the hope comes from young people right now. Some of the young leaders that are inspiring, regardless of how you see the different spaces, are young. The youngest members of Congress are Latinos and Latinas. AOC is inspiring a number of people. Frost is inspiring a number of people. The movement on gun control is led by young people saying, we're getting killed in schools. And I want to say, when I hear this argument of young people not participating, there is something really close to us as immigrants and as Latinos that proves that that's not the case, and it's dreamers. The dreamers are going to go down in history books as some of the big fighters of the 60s that put everything on the line in the nation for a cause. And all of them are young people and an example of how young people organize with passion, with leadership. I love to hire dreamers, because dreamers know how to do everything. They know how to do media, they know how to do fundraising, they know how to organize, they know how to speak in public. And it's thanks to the amazing exposure to organize in the communities. And I think the dreamers are the most amazing example that young people can be leaders. The final thing is take advantage of a lot of the opportunities on leadership programs that LULAC and other organizations offer. I remember we are I'm not going to reveal my age, but we are more or less in the same spaces. Some of us never had any trainings on, for example, fundraising or media or policy, etc. We came from a particular spaces. Now there are a lot of trainings. For example, all my state directors that are younger, we give them all the trainings in each one of those spaces. Other institutions are doing the same. So it's amazing. And this is not only a Latino problem. The biggest problem is Congress is the oldest that we ever had in the history of the nation. We have 90 years old in Congress. It's mostly white men that are not letting go of those positions. So I'm very hopeful on the young Latinos and young immigrants in the nation.
I want to make one comment on the voting piece when I say that, you know, the system is broken. For many years, they were like swing states, right? And then there were Latino swing states, and that Latinos could only swing a state in Florida, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, maybe, right? And Wisconsin, yeah, well, Wisconsin, right?
Georgia.
Wisconsin is less than 6% Latino, right? But my view of it is that Latinos are the swing vote in every state now. We can literally move an election in every state because those 5 votes, 10 votes, 10,000 votes, 100,000 votes can literally be the difference in a presidential race, or they can be the difference in a race in Wisconsin or Nebraska. Exactly. And so keep registering more Latinos, okay? We're going to do the work to back you up to make sure that they get out to vote and we have the resources that we need. Next question. Thank you.
So hi, my name is Rafael Concepcion. I'm from Syracuse, New York. So I was born and raised in the South Bronx in the 70s, which was, you know, the poster child for redlining. And I have the privilege now of being a professor at Syracuse University. And one of the things that I've been researching, which I thought was really, really exciting, is the use of AI systems for raising and closing the gap in low socioeconomic communities. And one of the things that I've noticed is we are not, so this isn't necessarily more a question, but just kind of to post something to you. I feel like generally as a whole, we're not necessarily leveraging 2 key components of the Latino experience, which happens to be, like everybody else's experience, transactionality and loyalty. Like right now we have a movement where we have ICE coming from everywhere, taking care, you know, taking people, even the night, but at the same time we have organizations that are saying, well, you can make a difference by voting. These people turn around and go, I don't even know how to do that because you guys just finished taking 10 people. And that makes it really hard to be able to cross that chasm into, yes, I do want to be able to do that. Yes, I do want to be able to participate. I had an experience in Syracuse where all of a sudden I wrote an op-ed for something that happened, and they turned around and they said, I wrote about it and I said, is this who we're going to be? Like, we're taking people right now. I'm driving to go deliver food for immigrants that can't come outside. 20 minutes away, Harriet Tubman was born. I'm like, is this who we're going to be? And everybody was like, round them up. Go get them, round them up. In 9 days, I built an entire AI-based platform for ICE notifications, immigrant rights notifications. You can turn around and you can teach language. You can mark observers, and you can store all of this information that can give people the way to be able to go, oh, I see, you just finished helping solving a problem for me. And if we can solve that individual problem, then we have loyalty. Then everything that you're talking about will develop trust. Where someone will go, oh, I can't believe that you guys did this. I can't look, dumb things. If an immigrant stands on the opposite side of the door and they don't understand, how are we gonna help them? How do these red cards help if they have more questions? So I set up like conversational AI agents that speak in 6 different languages so that they can ask more questions. I have those same agents now that can turn around and say, oh, you wanna move your stuff to online? Just talk to me. And all these AI agents are sitting in the background, filling out forms, looking at research, doing this kind of stuff. Like, we have the tech to do that, but we don't have a concerted effort of organizations to do this. So I literally sit in my truck, just frustrated, making code, making code, making code. And I'm like, this is good, but how do we get this to 10 million people? And what are you all doing as part of the organization? Obviously, I kind of want to talk to you a lot more. But what are we all doing to be able to kind of have that whole of Latino support? Rather than having 5 pockets here, 5 pockets there, who's going to be the person that's going to say, I'm going to stand up and let's do a nationwide thing to be able to protect ourselves?
So on the technology side, the beautiful thing about technology is that it levels the playing field. It really does. You can start a business online and no one knows how big you are or how small you are. And we all know now that those cell phones that we all carry around are as powerful as laptops and computers from 10 years ago. So love the investment. We need to continue to make that investment, but we need to be smarter about how we use it as well.